It started like any other Tuesday. The automatic glass doors hissed open, welcoming another customer into Grayson's Market. But this customer wasn't like the others. He wore a faded jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over his brow, and kept his hands deep in his pockets. He moved without drawing attention, intentionally so. No one recognized him. To the staff, he was just another shopper hunting for deals. But in truth, the man wandering past the canned goods was Daniel Grayson, the CEO of the entire Grayson's Market chain. He paused just inside the entrance, letting his eyes drift across the store he had built from the ground up. This was one of 18 branches that bore his name, a name now printed on faded signage and fraying uniforms. The floor was quiet, almost uncomfortably so. No cheerful greetings, no conversations between employees. Customers shuffled through aisles like ghosts, heads down, baskets half full. It wasn't just slow, it felt dead. Daniel continued down the aisle, pretending to browse. On the other side of the checkout counter stood a female cashier in her 30s, her hair loosely tied back, her eyes puffy and red. She forced a weak smile at a customer, but her hands visibly trembled, and her voice cracked as she said, "Thank you." Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Daniel ducked behind a shelf near the condiments, peering through the space between jars of mustard and pickles. The woman, her name tag read Kendra, had just wiped a tear from her cheek, right in the middle of her shift, not even trying to hide it. And that's when it happened. A loud voice cut through the air like a slap. "Crying on shift again?" A heavy-set man in a black vest labeled supervisor stomped from the back room, red-faced and scowling. He slammed a clipboard onto the counter in front of Kendra with a thud. "How many times do I have to tell you? If you can't hold it together, then quit!" Kendra froze. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the counter. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I'll be fine." But the man wasn't done. He leaned closer, his voice lowering to a growl. "You've already taken 2 days off this month. Don't be surprised if your shift next week disappears." No one stepped in. No one looked up. The silence was louder than any outburst. Daniel's chest tightened. This wasn't strict management. It was public intimidation. And it was happening under his name, inside the company he'd built on the principle that if you treated your employees right, they would treat your customers better. That philosophy had once helped him grow his business from a single location to a chain loved by families across the region. But what he was seeing now, it was something else entirely. As the supervisor stormed off, Daniel continued pretending to rearrange cans on the shelf, but his eyes never left Kendra. She took a shaky breath and resumed scanning items, her voice robotic, her posture rigid. Her lips were pressed tight together like she was holding back another breakdown. That's when Daniel knew. Something had changed. Not just in this store, but possibly in the entire company. The signs were all around him, neglected shelves, crumpled promotional signs leaning against trash bins. An onion rolled across the produce floor with no employee in sight to pick it up. And worst of all, people who had clearly stopped believing that what they did here mattered at all. He hadn't planned to get involved. He had only come to observe. But the silent cry from aisle 4 would not let him look away. Weeks before Daniel Grayson walked into that store under a worn jacket and a lowered cap, a letter arrived on his desk. It came in an unmarked brown envelope, no name, no return address, just a few lines written in shaky, uneven handwriting. "Someone at store 7 is being pushed to the edge. You need to look into it before it's too late." It sat in the middle of a cluttered boardroom table, surrounded by colorful sales charts and performance reports. Daniel had brought it up during the quarterly operations meeting, quietly placing it atop the spreadsheets like a warning flare in a storm. But the response from his regional directors had been immediate and scornful. "Probably just some Gen Z whining because they didn't get a raise," one chuckled, sipping coffee like it was all a joke. "Honestly," another chimed in, "if we listened to every complaint that crossed our inbox, we'd never get any real work done." There were smirks around the table, shrugs, a few eye rolls. Daniel had said nothing. Not then. But the weight of that letter never left his mind. It didn't read like a complaint. It read like a cry for help. Now standing quietly behind the shelves of canned vegetables, watching Kendra blink back tears and mechanically hand receipts to silent customers, he understood someone had been telling the truth. The letter wasn't a fluke. It was a warning, and it had been ignored. Daniel moved through the store like a ghost, invisible yet hyper-aware. Every corner held clues. The dairy section was disorganized. Expired milk sat beside half-empty crates. The bread shelves were almost bare, with only a few torn packages left behind. A promotional stand had fallen over, its sign slumped against a trash bin, as if the store itself had given up. At Grayson's Market, back when Daniel worked the floor himself, employees had lined up every morning to greet customers with a smile. Managers were trained to check for lighting, air quality, scent, and cleanliness before the doors opened. But here, the air smelled of burnt coffee and something stale. The floors were dull. The employees didn't make eye contact. They looked tired in a way that no good night's sleep could fix. The store didn't feel broken. It felt abandoned. As Daniel rounded the corner of the snack aisle, a new sound cut through the silence. Not yelling this time, but something far worse. A quiet, fractured sob echoing from behind the break room door. He froze mid-step. Slowly, he crept closer and leaned near the doorframe. Inside, he heard her. "I can't do this anymore," Kendra whispered between sobs. Her voice was raw, like every word scraped her throat on the way out. "I tried. I really tried. But it's never enough. They cut my hours again this week. I can't even afford gas. My rent's late." There was silence, then a second voice, softer, more timid. It was the young employee from earlier, the one restocking frozen goods with his head down. "Troy's coming after me too. Anyone who asks for time off or has kids, he punishes them." Kendra's voice broke again. "I didn't skip shifts because I was lazy. My son, he had an asthma attack. He was in the hospital. I begged Troy to let me switch. He told me I wasn't trustworthy." Daniel's body tensed. He stood frozen in place, heart pounding as if he'd just run a marathon. The calm mask he had worn cracked. Her words, shaking and full of despair, hit harder than any budget report or HR memo ever could. This wasn't about performance metrics or staffing efficiency. This was a human being, breaking. That night, Daniel didn't leave immediately. He waited outside as the sun dipped behind the gray strip mall roofline. He watched as Kendra clocked out, the glass doors sighing shut behind her. She walked slowly, as if her body was carrying more than just her own weight. Her purse was threadbare, her shoulders hunched, and her steps unsteady. At the edge of the lot, she stopped beside an aging sedan, its paint chipping, rear window patched with plastic and tape. She opened her wallet, not to grab keys, but to search for something more essential. Daniel stood in the shadows of a nearby tree, quietly observing. She flipped through the worn pockets of her wallet, a utility bill, a faded ID photo, a nail clipper. Then she turned it upside down. A few small coins tumbled out and clinked softly onto the asphalt. Kendra stared down at them, hands shaking. Then, without warning, she dropped to her knees and covered her face. Her whole body crumbled in a way that was all too familiar to Daniel, a collapse born not of weakness, but of carrying too much for too long. And right there, in the middle of a cracked parking lot beneath a flickering streetlight, she broke down. No customers, no supervisors, just her tears, and a car she wasn't sure she could drive home. Daniel watched. His breath caught. He had reviewed financials, examined wage trends, skimmed through countless employee evaluations and surveys, but nothing, not one chart, not one metric, had ever shown him this. Not until now. This wasn't a one-off complaint. This wasn't mismanagement. This was systemic neglect, rotting from within. Daniel stood in silence, his own shadow long and still under the glow of the overhead lights. He didn't feel cold, though the night wind tugged at his coat. He felt heavy, crushed by the quiet realization that something carrying his name had turned into something cruel. Kendra finally wiped her face, collected the coins, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine sputtered, coughed, and slowly came to life. As she pulled out of the lot, Daniel remained standing in the dark. His phone buzzed. A reminder about the next morning's strategy call. He silenced it. "I can't leave this place until I uncover the whole truth," he whispered. Not as a CEO, not as a boss, but as a man. The next morning, Daniel would return, not in a suit, not with a clipboard, but in a plain shirt and name tag. A temporary worker, a silent witness. Because somewhere between the tears in aisle 4 and the coins on the asphalt, he had made a decision. This wasn't just about fixing a broken store. It was about saving the people inside it. starting with the woman who still smiled through her pain. The next morning, just after sunrise, Daniel returned, not as the owner of Grayson's Market, but as the newest probationary employee. No suit, no title, just a light gray polo, black slacks, and a name tag that simply read Dan. No one greeted him as he stepped through the glass doors. No nods of recognition, no whispers. Perfect. He wanted it that way. He was assigned to the dry goods aisle, restocking cereal boxes next to a wiry young man with round glasses and a mop of slightly messy brown hair. "Welcome, newbie," the kid said without glancing up. "I'm Marcus. Don't bother asking too many questions. Around here, silence is the safest policy." Daniel smiled faintly. "Thanks, I'll remember that." But he had no intention of staying silent. As they worked side by side, Daniel gently probed. "How long have you been here?" 2 years, Marcus replied. "And I've never felt the air this heavy until recently." Daniel paused mid-shelf. "What changed?" Marcus lowered his voice, darting a glance around. "Troy's been tightening the screws, shuffling schedules last minute, cutting hours. Anyone with kids, anyone who needs time off, they're suddenly not priority. But if you keep your mouth shut, if you don't question anything, you magically get more hours." Daniel's chest tightened. He was already starting to see it. A reward system built not on performance, but on obedience. Fear disguised as efficiency. "What about Kendra?" he asked, pretending to straighten a box of noodles. Marcus hesitated. "She's one of the best we've got. But after her son's asthma attack, she missed 2 shifts. Troy went after her hard, said she wasn't dependable. Now she's down to less than 15 hours a week, can't cover rent, barely gets scheduled at all." Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. That number, 15 hours, had crossed his desk before. He'd approved it, thinking it was part of a broader efficiency review for Store 7. But now he saw it clearly. That figure wasn't about business strategy. It was about someone's survival. At the end of his shift, Daniel waited until the night crew began their transition. The store's front quieted. Managers were distracted. It was the perfect moment. He slipped into the side office and pulled up the internal scheduling system using an emergency access code he created years ago, but never thought he'd have to use. The interface loaded slowly. He typed in Kendra's name. Week by week, month by month, the pattern revealed itself like bruises on a clean face. First month, 32 hours. Next, 24. Then 15. This week, 9. Each drop accompanied by internal notes. Unreliable. Not priority. Avoid scheduling for weekends. Daniel searched other names. Marcus, Linda, Georgie, all showed the same trend, declining hours, cold notes in the margins. But then he looked up the employees who Troy seemed to favor, those who stayed quiet, those who asked no questions. Their schedules were stable, some even increased. This wasn't mismanagement. It was sabotage, systematic, quiet, calculated. Troy had turned scheduling into a weapon. He bled his staff dry to polish his reports. Trimmed hours here, cut costs there. On paper, the store looked lean and efficient. In reality, it was surviving on fear and silence. Daniel clenched his jaw, his knuckles whitening against the edge of the desk. He wasn't just staring at numbers. He was staring at lives. That afternoon, Daniel marched to the manager's office. He knocked 3 times. The door creaked open. Country music hummed softly from a portable speaker. Troy sat behind the desk, sipping coffee, clipboard in hand, looking like the king of a tiny, crumbling kingdom. "What's the issue?" he muttered without looking up. Daniel stepped inside, calm, controlled. "I've heard some things about Kendra, about her hours being cut. Is that true?" Troy scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "She's a walking HR problem. Always late, always asking for time off. If you ask me, she's lucky she's still on payroll. But she requested time off for her hospitalized son," Daniel countered, his voice cool. "This isn't a daycare, man," Troy snapped. "I need people I can count on, not sob stories." Daniel stared at him. "And cutting her hours helps with what exactly?" Troy smirked. "It helps with everything. Trim hours, reduce payroll, corporate sees savings. I get praised. Win-win." "You mean you manipulate the schedule to punish the people who speak up?" "I optimize," Troy replied, smug. "If people can't handle real work, they don't belong here. The quiet ones, they get rewarded. The rest, they learn." Daniel let the silence stretch. Then he stepped forward, slowly pulling something from his coat. Not a knife, not a report. A badge, polished, engraved, and unmistakable. Executive officer. Troy blinked. The clipboard nearly slipped from his hands. Wait, what? You're? Yes, Daniel said. I'm the man who designed this store, who built the system you just twisted into a tool for abuse. He reached out, palm open. Give me your keys. Troy didn't move at first. Then his face contorted, unsure whether to lash out or beg. Slowly he pulled the key ring from his pocket and placed it in Daniel's hand. You're making a mistake, Troy hissed. These people, they just want to be coddled. They don't care about this place. Daniel looked him dead in the eye. They've been caring, every day, while you crushed them under schedules designed to break them. No more words were exchanged. As Troy left the lobby in silence, the store around them stood still. Employees froze mid-task. The air felt like the moment before a thunderclap. Daniel turned around, keys still in hand. I need to meet with all of you, he said. 10 minutes. Break room. They came. They came. Every one of them. Standing, sitting, leaning against shelves and walls. No one spoke. No one moved. Daniel stepped to the front of the room. No podium, no mic, just a man, tired, determined, finally awake. I failed you, he began. I failed in the one thing that matters most, making sure you are treated with respect. The room held its breath. I've seen what's been happening here. I've heard it. I believe you. And starting today, how we run this store will change. That change begins with me. He turned to Kendra, standing quietly at the edge of the group. If you're willing, I'd like you to step up as assistant manager. The room shifted. Eyes widened. A few whispered. Kendra looked stunned. Me? She said softly. But I've cried in front of customers. I've been written up. Daniel smiled gently. And yet you came back. You stood tall. You kept caring. You've proven what leadership looks like. She hesitated, then nodded. If you believe in me, I'll try. Don't try, Daniel replied. You've already done it. For the first time in weeks, the air in Store 7 changed. Not overnight. Not with confetti or applause, but with something stronger, clarity. The truth had been buried under shift schedules and fear. Now, it was finally free. The break room had never been this full. Some staff sat on milk crates. Others leaned against the wall. Hands still dusted from stocking shelves, eyes rimmed with uncertainty and disbelief. And there stood Daniel Grayson, not as a ghost from corporate, but as the man who built the house they now lived in. Yet it was not him they all stared at. It was Kendra. Still wrapped in the modest folds of her red and black uniform, eyes wide and disoriented, Kendra stood like someone who had just been pulled out of a storm and asked to walk on water. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Me? She had whispered minutes ago. Assistant manager? Daniel nodded, his voice warm but clear. Officially, with authority, with trust. I've been written up, she had said. They said I was unreliable. I cried in front of customers. And yet, Daniel had answered, you came back. You didn't run. You worked through pressures no one else saw. And you never gave up. The break room had gone silent. Staff who had once kept their heads down were now stealing glances at her. Marcus leaned slightly forward, lips parting as if to say something, but the moment was too raw. Kendra finally spoke. Her voice shook, but it held. If you believe in me, I'll try. Daniel gave the faintest smile. You don't need to try, Kendra. You've already done it. Now just keep going. The next hour blurred. The keys to the manager's office passed into her hand, not with fanfare, but with a quiet, heavy reverence. Daniel stepped back, quite literally, to the shelves and aisles, letting her cross the threshold alone. And when she entered that room, the door clicked behind her with a softness that made her shiver. It was still Troy's office. Still smelled of stale coffee, old cologne, and a kind of manufactured tension. She paused by the desk, her fingers brushing the backrest of the cracked leather chair. She sat slowly, unsure if she was allowed to feel anything yet. In front of her lay the store computer. She opened the scheduling software. At first, the names and hours felt clinical, data. But then she saw the patterns. Linda, 5 straight night shifts. Jorge, less than 7 hours between closings and openings. Cassie, no schedule at all, just a note, frequent leave requests. Kendra's throat tightened. Troy hadn't just punished her. He had engineered a system that suffocated everyone. Strategically, silently. Then she saw it. A battered notebook shoved into the drawer, its corners bent, pages marked with red ink. She flipped it open. Cut Linda's shifts. Complains too much. Cassie equals childcare problem. Avoid giving hours. Jorge, never offer weekends, too soft. Marcus, awkward, hide from customers. Line after line. Not just notes, not even strategy. These were judgments, control mechanisms, the quiet machinery of cruelty. Kendra slowly closed the notebook and slid it aside. Her hands trembled, but not from fear this time, from resolve. She opened a new page in the software, titled it First Draft Fairness, and then she began. Prioritize single mothers for morning shifts. Limit consecutive night shifts to 3 max. Block off study time for part-timers in school. Shift trades allowed. No penalties for asking. Every keystroke felt like stitching something back together, something that had been torn for far too long. At the bottom she wrote, "Any concerns, come see me directly. My door is always open." She hit save. That afternoon, 5 minutes before closing, Kendra sent an internal message. Subject, team check-in. No clipboard, no corporate script, just a simple invite to the break room. They came. Linda sat with arms crossed, warily. Georges hovered near the back. Marcus picked at a label on a soda bottle. Others just stood silently, waiting. Kendra stepped forward. Her hand still smelled faintly of onions from restocking. Her voice was soft but steady. "I know these past weeks have been hell," she began, "and I used to think that staying quiet was the only way to survive." She swallowed hard. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry, not just for staying silent, but for not standing beside you sooner." A pause, a breath. "Starting today, things change. The schedule reflects your lives now, not punishments. You'll get consistent hours. If something's not working, we talk, we adjust." The room stayed quiet, but the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt new, unfamiliar, as if everyone was holding a breath they didn't yet trust. "And if I get this wrong," Kendra added, "come to me. Or, if you're too scared, go straight to Mr. Grayson. He's listening, I promise." Then, quietly from the back, a clap. Then another, and another. No cheers, no fanfare. Just exhalation, relief in a rhythm. Afterward, Kendra lingered near the door. As staff trickled out, she spotted Marcus hauling a supply crate toward the back. "Marcus," she called. He stopped, looked back. "Something wrong?" he asked. "You helped Linda train that new hire earlier, didn't you?" Marcus scratched his head. Kind of. I'm not great with, people." Kendra shook her head, smiling faintly. "Troy said you weren't fit for customers. He also said I couldn't be trusted." Marcus blinked, really looked at her for the first time. "You talk to your coworkers with patience. You're kind. You care. That's the kind of person I want out front." Marcus stared. "You mean register?" "I'll train you myself," she said, "starting tomorrow." It took him a moment, but then he nodded, a little awkward, a little unsure, but it was a nod from someone who'd once believed they'd never be picked. Days passed, and little by little, Grayson's market began to change. Linda restocked fruit while humming along with the store radio. Jorge smiled at a regular customer who remembered his name. Marcus helped a grandmother find the pickles. And Kendra, she moved through the aisles not like someone bracing for impact, but like someone planting seeds. No slogans, no banners, just people choosing to show up for each other. And from the end of the frozen foods aisle, Daniel watched, quietly, content. Real leadership wasn't about stepping in. It was about knowing when to step back and watching the roots take hold. The quiet revolution had begun, one schedule line at a time. 1 week later, the automatic doors of Grayson's Market opened again, not to a thunderclap of corporate banners or trumpeted announcements, but to the quiet shuffle of worn-in soles and the soft clink of keys in a coat pocket. Daniel Grayson stepped inside with no entourage, no polished badge, no speech to give, just a pale blue shirt, a light coat slung over his shoulder, and eyes wide open, not with scrutiny, but with hope. And the store, it breathed differently. The aisles no longer echoed with silence. Shelves were fully stocked. The produce glistened. A handwritten note on the bread display read, "Fresh batch at 2 p.m. Thank you for your patience." The air felt lighter, as if the building itself had shed its tension. Near Register 3, Marcus stood beside an elderly woman, gently guiding her items onto the belt. He even laughed, a sound that seemed foreign just days ago. At the fruit display, Linda restocked apples while casually chatting with a customer. And at Register 4, there was Kendra, calm, focused, professional. She knelt beside a small girl holding a bear-shaped sticker. The child's mother offered a grateful smile, and Kendra returned it, not the strained smile of someone trying to hold it together, but one of quiet peace. Daniel lingered at the back, unnoticed by most, and that's exactly how he wanted it. Because leadership, he knew now more than ever, wasn't about being seen. It was about what remained when you weren't. Eventually, Kendra noticed him. She blinked in surprise but didn't falter. When she finished assisting the customer, she approached him. "I didn't think you'd stop by today," she said. Daniel smiled softly. "I didn't think I'd see this place like this so soon." Kendra lowered her gaze. "I'm just trying to do the right thing. I still panic. Some days I almost gave up." Daniel's voice dropped to a gentle murmur. "But you didn't." He paused. "And that matters more than anything." She hesitated. "I used to think I was just replaceable." Daniel shook his head. "You're the reason I still believe this company deserves to exist." Later that evening, Kendra sat alone in the manager's office. The air no longer held the scent of pressure. The shift report was complete. The schedules had been sent out, balanced, fair, human. She picked up a blank sheet of paper and taped it to the wall just above the monitor. Then, with a black marker, wrote in bold, "Schedules exist to support, not to punish." Below that, she added, "Every hour worked is a piece of someone's life. Listen first, adjust later. No one should cry over a paycheck. Good people don't need control, just trust." That night, as the store closed and the last lights dimmed, Kendra stood for a moment at checkout lane 4, the same lane that once felt like the edge of a cliff. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She simply exhaled and turned off the light. On her way home, she stopped at the gas station. Her wallet didn't feel empty this time. Her hands didn't shake. And when she glanced into the back seat, her son was there, curled up, fast asleep. She filled the tank, got in, closed the door, and for the first time in a long time, smiled. Sometimes, the strongest person is the one who broke down mid-shift and still showed up the next morning. If this story moved you, leave a single dot in the comments. We're listening, and more stories are coming.